The nature versus nurture debate over behavior and personality has been around since 1869 when it was first coined by Francis Galton. The debate stems from the idea that behavior is either determined by an individual's genetics or their environment. This means that genetics will either determine the most important parts of a person's personality or behavior is a learned trait from watching other people interact or do other things. Recent studies have helped with this argument by demonstrating that certain behaviors in animals correlate strongly with certain genes. To do this, researchers have to isolate behavior that is easily measurable. So for two examples that they did this with, one of them is the tunneling mice. These are mice that will live out in prairies or forests, and they dig tunnels in such a way that there is a variable tunnel length between species. So scientists took these tunneling mice, and they placed them in sterile environments where they would tunnel and create their environment that they wanted to create. And so scientists would measure the individual tunnel length between these mice. So this is a measurable behavioral trait that would then later be correlated with certain genes that each of the mice in these different species had. Another species that they used were mosquitoes. These mosquitoes were taken from North Africa, where they were taken from densely populated human regions and less densely populated regions. The mosquitoes from more densely populated regions always would go towards a human smell when given the choice between a human and an animal smell. The mosquitoes taken from less densely populated regions would always go towards the animal smells and would less likely go towards the human smells. So with both of these behaviors, they were measurable and given ample opportunity to collect lots and lots of data to be able to get a good sample size and see if any sort of gene would be able to correlate with how these behaviors played out. What they did then was take the genetic information from each species, and they would run it through certain programs to try and find genes that were similar in these species and correlate them to these behaviors. What they found was in the tunneling mice these mice actually had 3 genes that correlated with tunnel length. If the mice had one of these gene sets, then the tunnel was shorter. If mice had 2 of these gene sets, their tunnel was medium-sized, and if it had 3 of these gene sets, the tunnel was really long. So this tunneling behavior was directly influenced by this number of genes that each mice had, regardless of whether or not the mice actually saw other mice tunneling. With the mosquitoes from the densely populated human regions, where they actually were exclusively go towards the human smells when tested, had a gene that allowed them to exclusively seek out the human smells, while the mosquitoes from the other less densely human populated regions did not have this gene. So they did not try and find the human smells as much. They only found the animal smells. So both of these behaviors, these measurable behaviors, had a direct correlation with the gene set that these researchers had. So this is important because genes play an integral role in everyday life of an organism, and even in humans. So with what these scientists found was that the behavior of these mice and mosquitoes that allowed them to survive was directly influenced by a gene or gene set in these animals. And this is important because we can then apply this to human behavior and how humans live. We may not have to survive by tunneling like mice do, but these same certain behaviors still exist in human nature, and we should then be able to find behaviors that are directly correlated with traits and possibly prove that the nature versus nurture argument is more towards the nature side, in that genes govern our behavior rather than we learn our behavior through the environment.